Hey, this is Tony Boss Bolin coming to you from the Lincoln Addict Podcast.
Steadily it rises.
The Lincoln Addict back with another video. On this episode, I'm going to basically do my normal deep dive listing review. But I think what I'm going to do going forward, because I do plenty of these listing reviews, I'm also going to upload this as a podcast episode because this is the in-depth deep dive of this particular listing on Bring a Trailer, and I want more people to be able to consume this content. And of course, just so you know, I am still working on the typical podcast content that I always work on for the normal episodes. But really, I'm just trying to get more content out. And what I want to show you here is the 62 Lincoln Continental Convertible that has a lineage to JFK that we're going to go over here in just a moment. The cool thing is this car, in my opinion, quick high level, seems to be very, very nice. Definitely some money invested into this restoration, if you will. So we'll do a deep dive. I'm also hoping what I'm going to try to do on this one for those that aren't maybe looking for a deep dive and aren't looking for more of this podcast episode from me, the Lincoln Addict, I'm going to try to do a second version that's a very short, 1, 2, 3 kind of thing, and just get down to the nuts and bolts really quick for someone that's looking for that, right? There's different audience types out there. There's going to be some people that say, hey, I'm sitting on my couch, I'm going to pop on Apple TV like I do, and you're looking to consume content based upon what you like or something that you may eventually invest in. And then there's going to be other people that are on their phone, they click on this video and they see, wow, okay, I'm talking about this car way more in depth than they want or that they need, and they're going to click off of it in 2 minutes or less, and that's definitely what I don't want. So this is the longer version, the deep dive, I'm going to call it. As I get started, though, on this episode, I'm going to give one huge shout out to one of my key title sponsors, which is Devious Customs. You see the website right here, and if you go to Devious Customs, you can go to kits and parts and shop Lincolns. I'm showing you this now if you're consuming this content on YouTube, and you'll see that Jeff and team at Devious Customs, they have a ton of products. Oftentimes I think people go, oh wow, I don't want to customize my Lincoln, so I'm not going to go to Devious Customs. That's not always the case, because if you look here, let's say you have a 66 through 69 car and you need a windshield. Look no further, he has them available. There are, I would say the majority of items here are kind of more along the lines of customizing, but let's say you have a 64 or 65 dash. He's got dash lenses if you want to replace that glass material, if you will. Alternator, if you want to do an alternator upgrade. And oh, by the way, if you're looking to add air suspension or do door replacements, in terms of the door panels. And then, oh, by the way, the last thing I'll say is he's got these control units for the doors. So let's say you have window switches that you don't want to pay to have rebuild, or they're pretty thrashed, and you go, hey, I don't know what I can do to get all my windows working. The window switches are pretty bad off. You can get these door control units. They're a little pricey, I know, but they're made out of billet aluminum, and they have these really nice switches. So again, the key thing is you have a bunch of options. So again, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Typically, these videos, I dive right into the review. I will do that going forward, but I wanted to kind of just lay a little bit of the foundation to say, hey, for the folks that have continued to come back and listen to Lincoln Addict Podcast, I appreciate that. I'm trying to put more and more production into those episodes, and it takes time. And that's the bottom line. If you don't invest the time here on YouTube, you're not going to get any traction. So I have tried to invest the time. I have a whole stack of Lincoln stuff right next to me here that I went through, part of my collection, kind of digging for different things to quote and different articles and things like that. And it just takes a lot of time. So thanks for the support. Now, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And I think you guys will be thoroughly, happy with kind of what I'm going to display here as it relates to this 62 Lincoln Continental Convertible. Again, I did my normal, what I'll call presentation, and I'll kind of bump in, hopefully, throughout this between, me talking to you, but mostly I want you to get the content. But this is, what we're going to look at now. Now, when we look at this Lincoln Continental Convertible, the first thing that sticks out is there's 3 days left on this one. Of course, I get a notification anytime this content posts, and you can do the same as well. If you go to bringatrailer.com and you sign up so that you can add comments on these listings at the bottom, it'll basically ask, I think it kind of says, hey, do you want a notification when this type of car is posted? So as soon as the car goes live, you'll get an email that says, hey, this car is on BaT, which is short for Bring a Trailer. Now, I've prefaced this before. I have no connection to Bring a Trailer. I have no connection to this seller. I started doing these videos only as kind of a PSA, public service announcement. I did help in the past, and I have continued to still help some people buy and sell Lincolns. For those that don't know, going back, 5+ years ago, basically kind of under the moniker the Lincoln Broker. And I was doing that, and I had a lot of good success. And I said, how can I maybe further what I'm doing there, but do more of a PSA and talk about some of the things that you need to know about these cars? So enough with that. Many of you already know that history. But this 62 Lincoln Continental Convertible, what we're reading here from Bring a Trailer, was acquired about 3-4 years ago from back in 2021 by the seller from the second owner. So he watched JFK ride in the back of this car during a local visit. So we'll talk more about that. Again, there is lineage to JFK. Here's the key thing. This car was restored 2014 through 2015, and they say with paint, a reupholstered interior, mechanical overhaul, and the seller's acquisition, the black soft top and upholstery was replaced. It kind of goes in to talk about the white over red convertibles powered by the 430, which is standard. We'll go through some of that with my deep dive here. And it has kind of the normal type stuff. These aren't really features, but this is all kind of what I call the RSTLNE, which if you've been a Wheel of Fortune fan for a long time, everybody used to pick those letters for the final little deal. But eventually they just go, look, we're going to give you those. Okay. So when I say it's like RSTLNE, it's a given. Okay. So there weren't a lot of features available or there weren't a lot of options on these cars because they were so heavily optioned from the factory, if that makes sense. But they always kind of list those, and that's a good thing, especially for a casual observer. It's offered by the seller in West Hartford, Connecticut, so that's a key thing, and that's always going to be over here in these like bullet points. They'll mention the location, and the key thing there, you're going, well, hey, why does that matter? Well, number one, it'll sometimes give a little bit of insight to where this car was originally at, which we'll get to. And oh, by the way, if you buy this car, you have to arrange the shipping, right? So that's a key piece. The previous owner took photos of JFK riding in the Continental during the parade in Buffalo on October 14, 1962. So we'll talk more about this. This plaque that you see, this, according to the seller, was provided, which you can see here through that sentence, by the White House. You can see here from the rear, again, just a beautiful car. So many people love the 61, 62, 63s. This, of course, being in the middle of those three particular years. And, we can see from this back trim here, what a standout is. If you've watched my video where I talk about the exterior of the 62 Lincolns, that's available here on my YouTube channel. One of the key things is those longer, what I refer to as kind of rectangle shapes, that matches the back to the front grille, and that's just a real nice kind of tie-in specific to 62. The car was finished in Sultana white. It was repainted, so we did talk about that. And they talk about a few things that were redone there. We can see here the interior looks really good. I think you're either a fan of this color or you're not, but I think I would argue that the Sultana white color, or this white color in general, with this interior color, is a very classy color. It was very popular in that era. And it may not be my favorite interior color, but I certainly would drive this car and definitely enjoy it. The car was ordered with red upholstery. They always talk about red leather. Just for those that don't know, leather was technically an option in the sedans, but it was an automatic option in the convertible. So I guess you could special order, but I mean, it's very rare. They're always going to be leather unless it was redone and it was, done in vinyl. So they talk about some of the refurbishments, if you will, that were done there. The odometer says 38K. I don't know that there's any way for us to validate that. Is it, probably the gut feeling is 138,000, right? It's clicked over. For the younger audience that doesn't know, back in the day, the odometers at, 99,999 would roll over. So you often hear, quote, original miles. And that is typically a nod to the fact that what's on the odometer is what's the actual mileage. But, here we don't really know. I don't think there's any paperwork or any paper trail that I saw here that would give us an indication like, hey, it had an oil change, in 1989 that was at 22,000 miles. It's just, sometimes you can kind of piece that together. We can see the engine bay here. Again, the original 430. We'll dive a little bit more into that here in just a moment. And then we have the VIN plate, the VIN identification information. I've talked about this in the past. This year, and I don't want to get into too many specifics, when you open the driver door and you look down to right to the right of where this VIN plate is at, that's where your left foot would be when you're driving. Okay, this does eventually change, and it gets moved to the inside of the door jamb. So in this particular model and year 62, 63, I always forget off the top of my head which year that it moves mid-cycle. But certainly here, I think it was 63 because this is a very late 62 car, which we're going to get into. There's some specifics here. Bring a Trailer does a fantastic job of breaking this down. I'm going to go over this as well. You've got the owner manual. You've got a few videos here. I'm not going to click on these videos, but they're fantastic. This is what we need to see. And kudos to the seller. Kudos to Bring a Trailer for possibly nudging them to say, hey, this is what we need to help explain to people what this car has. And one of the examples of it, and I will click on just this one, just showing that when you push in to open the rear door, the auto drop worked. It went down, closed the door, the auto drop went up. He does that for both sides. There's a driving video as well. There's an engine running. There's a top, which is sped up a little bit. That's typical. You speed up that a little bit so that it's not that minute cycle. 50 to 60 seconds typically. So you have that. Now, what I want to do is I do want to jump over here to my presentation and show you this. We'll go through some of the key information, try to make this as efficient as possible for those that want this longer content. And again, try to do a quicker version for people that want a shorter episode. If you are consuming this via a podcast app like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, certainly you're going to get an enhanced experience if you go over to the YouTube channel and search Lincoln Addict. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. And you're getting a visual of all of this. Much of what I put together is all of my creation. It's part of what I do so that I can quickly access information that I want or need to reference. But in 60, which my apologies, I have the wrong title at the title of this slide, should say a 62 Lincoln Continental production. We know that there were 3,212 convertibles built for that model year, which was 246 more than the previous year. Sedans, of course, much higher, 27,849. I just pulled the screenshot just a few moments ago from Haggerty. I'm a Haggerty customer. No affiliation other than being a paying customer to them. But if you are a paying customer to Haggerty, you can log in to their website and you can check out their evaluation tool. And these cars value anywhere from 26,200 all the way up to post $100,000. Now, this car is special because it does have lineage to JFK. And again, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. The VIN number is always listed, and you can actually, for those that don't know, on Bring a Trailer, you can click on that red serial number, VIN number, and it will take you to like a Google search, right? So I don't think I've mentioned that. But, in the past, that comes in handy because if it's an alumni car and they've posted it already, it'll bring you to, and more than likely show you some of those other different websites it's been on. including Bring a Trailer, if it had been. This appears to be a true survivor car in the sense that it's a car that hasn't been customized. It has been refurbished, it has been restored to a certain extent, but for the most part, it's a car that's going to appeal to a lot of people. We'll talk more about this photo here on the bottom left in a few moments. It was provided in the auction, and we'll talk about some of that lineage there on where JFK was in October of '62. It is in the Lincoln registry. It was just added last month on June 8th, and the gentleman that runs that does a great job. You can always just Google Lincoln registry, and you can search the VIN, and that's what I did just a few minutes ago. For 62, here's what I like to break down at the bottom. I'll start there first. There were 31,061, so 31,061 total units built for 62, which is the sedans and convertibles. I kind of just didn't include the limos because the limos come at a later point in most years, and it's just a low number anyways. But if you look at the VIN number, which I have up top, the number 2, that first digit indicates the year, so it's 62. The Y is the assembly plant, which I always talk about as Wixom. 86 is the body style. In this case, it's a 4-door convertible. H is the engine code, pretty standard, 430, MEL 430. The last 6 digits or the 6 through 11 character digits, it's always going to start with a 4. So you'll recall, if you're a return listener, I always reinforce that. And then the number, so you kind of ignore the 4. And then 29324, it's the 29,234th built for that model year. I think some people have chimed in the past and they said, well, you can't 100%, tie that to the exact date. And listen, I totally get it. I mean, we're talking 60 years ago, but it's the closest record that we have. Could the plate have been made on a Friday and the car was finished on a Monday? Absolutely. But certainly that's going a little bit above and beyond what even I do. The VIN plate that we saw on Bring a Trailer, they do a great job with posting a photo of it. You basically have, and it's kind of a little bit tough to see, this is just a screenshot of the image, but you have 74A in the upper left corner. That is the 4-door convertible. 54A, as an example, would be the sedan. The letter M, it's kind of a little bit tough to make out. It almost looks like an N, but it is an M from what I can see and what Bring a Trailer listed. I think it's just the way it's stamped. It is Sultana white, and of course they did mention that it was repainted. The trim is 85, which is considered red. I would consider it more maroon, but it's just what they called the colors in that era. The date, we'll look at the next slide, 19G. We'll break that down. The DSO is Buffalo, so although this car is in Connecticut, what that basically tells us is in the lifespan of this car in its existence, it's really pretty much remained in the Northeast. The axle and the trans, that stuff's all pretty standard. So if we look at 19G, we look at G, and G corresponds to July, and 19 is the date of the calendar, right? So in the month. So basically G is July 19th, so July 19th of 1962. This car would have been built. Basically, it's the 29th, as we looked at on the last page, 29,324 out of 31,061 total, right? So that's at the very end of that production run for the most part. Not the last day, but it's towards the end. The production ran from approximately late 61 into early July 62-ish. But again, this one here would maybe make me think like, okay, well, the production, based upon my research, may have actually went to end of July, kind of very early August. I mean, there's a lot of the records just don't exist, and it's hard to figure this stuff out. But that's just, that last bullet point's kind of just a little bit of insight. So the pros of this listing, we're going to go back and look at a few more photos here. There is lineage to JFK, and I have said this before. Custom Lincolns do typically sell for a lot of money. However, if you look at any Lincoln that's tied to JFK, that is a stock or more of a stock appearance like this car is, right? It's been restored. The seats have been redone. The paint's been redone. But if there's lineage back to JFK, that certainly drives the price up. And those prices, they're almost in a class of their own when it comes to if it's Jackie O or it's JFK, rest in peace to both of them. The price is going to be higher than a standard Lincoln, and I think most of you will realize that. JFK was in this area at this time, so I think like you could have someone that's like, okay, yeah, there's a photo of JFK. How do we really know? And some of that stuff gets hard to prove. But a simple internet search landed me on ForgottenBuffalo.com. He talks about here on this day, October 1462. They were in Buffalo. Here's a photo, and then you scroll down here, and that's probably where this photo came from. So you could then break down and say, well, how do we know 100%? Listen, I don't think, unless there's some sort of paper that shows that plaque 100%, you have to kind of trust the seller. I have seen other channels that I follow, these guys that are into the Mopars and they, into these different Mustangs. And, there's a lot more cars that were produced in heavier numbers. And there's a lot of people that will do things to make a fake version of a car because it will make them more money, or they kind of fabricate stories. I haven't really seen much of that in the Lincoln world. I did learn something, as it relates to the Lyndon Johnson 64, when I did a podcast episode about it. There was information in an LCOC publication from many years prior where they interviewed someone, and he kind of basically said, yeah, this was the car that was on the tarmac when JFK's coffin was being loaded. I have since done another, deep dive on that and explained additional information I found that wasn't 100%, that wasn't true. It wasn't that exact car. But again, what I'm saying is we have to take the seller's word for it in this case. And I think, these photos and the fact that JFK was in that area, and there could be more documents that the person has that they didn't show in the listing. So I think, again, it's ultra rare. It's awesome with the JFK lineage. The restoration per the photos looks to be very nice. We'll look back at a few of them here in a moment. Engine bay looks great. They did do, according to Bring a Trailer, and you will see it in the photo evidence, upgraded air conditioning. This is key because, oftentimes someone wants a car that looks original, which this car does, but, let's upgrade a few things. And, what's super important to a lot of people is air conditioning. Now, air conditioning is a little bit different in a convertible. I can attest to that, but certainly to have it working, to have it upgraded with newer refrigerant, you can argue all day which one's cooler, but at the end of the day, this one has a newer compressor, and we'll talk about it. The original tires, or at least I'm assuming they're the original, they are included. So with the way things have gotten in the car world, a lot of people want the original stuff. And, this person has taken the time to saran wrap or shrink wrap, whatever you want to call it, the tires, and they're going to include them with the sale, which is cool. Although the car is restored per se, it does maintain its original look. I think that's very crucial as more of these Lincolns continue to get restored. You have a lot of people that want an original one, and this one kind of has that look and feel. Okay, this is being ultra critical. Okay, so if the seller or someone sees this, again, I like to preface that this car to me looks very nice. If I was in a position to buy it, I would. I always say, hey, you want to look at it, you want to get eyes on it, okay? That's always important. I don't care how good the car looks. But I will say this. To me, when we go and we look at these photos in a minute, the undercarriage isn't as detailed as, per se, the rest of the car. Most people are not going to care about that. I do not see this as a deal breaker whatsoever. But I think if you really break it down, the engine bay on this car just looks fantastic, right? And again, it's not a deal breaker because if you bought this car and you said, you know what, I want to take it to the next level. I'm going to go underneath it. I'm going to pressure wash it. I'm going to clean it up more. It does look like, there's undercoating and things like that. Of course, it's a Northeast car. Believe me, it doesn't look bad at all. But again, being ultra critical, I think that it just doesn't look as good as the rest of the car. And that's okay. Okay, I'm just pointing things out. That's all. The power steering line, I want to look at that here in a moment underneath the car. And then I would like to see more paperwork of the receipts, including the restoration. So we've seen this, and I've called this out on other listings on Bring a Trailer. It's so important to me. It's critical. If you have paperwork that shows that you had a $10 or $20 or $30 or $40,000 paint job, or you had a $5,000 interior job, or whatever these numbers are, include that if you're a seller, because that's going to help reassure to someone that is maybe trying to get the thumbs up from his or her significant other. Maybe the husband wants to buy it as an investment, and the wife's like, I don't know. And he says, look at all these receipts. This guy's got all this money in the past 10 years in this car. It's certainly not going to hurt. And if you do have it and you're going to include it with the sale, think Bring a Trailer, they go and white out any personal information. So it's not like, you're at risk of your home address or name or anything like that getting released. So what I'm going to do here is try to jump. I'm going to jump back over, and we're going to look at the photos. But I did want to just for one moment. I know I said this at the beginning. I can't thank Bring a Trailer enough for their commitment to what they do. They do these awesome listings, right? And that allows me to do these reviews. But they do a great job of pulling all this information together. And I do think that over the course of time has. To me, I tell people all the time, they go, hey, will you help me sell a car? And I go, look, it's not that I don't want to help you. Just go and Bring a Trailer. You're going to get a worldwide audience, right? And you're not going to deal with the tire kickers. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you post stuff, sometimes you guys have posted stuff on Facebook or Instagram, and you kind of get people, and, they do that auto response on Facebook, which kills me. Do you still have it? Yeah, I have it. I'm going to delete it when the car is sold. Will you take this? And they hit you at half, and it's like, no, delete, whatever. Bring a Trailer. To me, it removes all of that. Of course, there are questions that come up, but let's take a look now at the listing again, and then we'll wrap this up. Some of you, I know, you're going, hey, this is forever. This is taking forever. Hey, believe me, there's people on my channel that I appreciate that want the content, the longer content. And there's going to be people that you click on this and you're like, wow, 45 minutes or whatever the number is. I don't have time for that. Totally get it. Everybody's different. So back on this listing, we're going to go through some of the photos here. Again, just a beautiful looking car. I do sometimes, one thing I don't always point out is, someone will say, hey, the stance is 100% correct. Unless I'm with the car and I can measure it, it's hard for me to tell if the stance is 100% correct. I think this is more of an original car, at least underneath. So I think for the most part, the stance looks fine. I like to look at, the rear and kind of see where that white wall is in the wheel well in the front. But I think for the most part, it looks spot on to me with this one. I do love when they show a photo with the top up. It kind of gives you that indication of, we always see the top down on these convertibles, but with the top down, or excuse me, with the top up, you get to see that, of course, you have there's no B-pillar here, which is cool. And of course, with the top being redone, you get a chance to see that, hey, someone has spent the money. You could spend anywhere from $500 to just over $1,000 on just the material for the top. And then you have to have someone install it. Hopefully, and I don't know that they said this, I didn't see anything, but hopefully that anytime you do the top, go the extra mile and spend the $200 to $250 on the wire harness that goes through that top. Because over the course of time, with that top going up and down, those wires become a little bit brittle and just different things, right? So unfortunately, you can't change the wiring in that top. So that's just a public service announcement until you kind of start cutting into things. And it's just the key thing. Spend the $225 to $250-ish to buy the wiring and then have it done if you're doing the top. So enough with that. But again, when I look at the chrome and I look at the trim and I look at everything on this car, it looks really, really nice from these photos. In 62, of course, it does not have the keyhole cover and it does not have the, quote, longer tail on the L. And that is because although those two items both carried over into 62, those were early 62 only. We have documentation in some of the LCOC publications that have been produced that kind of specify the dates, and I kind of talk a little bit about that in some of my other videos. Again, just a beautiful car, and I love the fact that they included photos with the top up. I think that is totally key. We can see it does have the 62 wheel covers. In 61, you would have had the star in the middle, and it didn't say Lincoln Continental, I don't believe. But of course, it changes. So 62, 63 specific on the wheel covers. Here we can see the headlights. They left the headlights and the high beams on, so you've got all four. That gives us an indication that all the bulbs are working fine there. And then you've got some kind of beautiful photos of just front 3/4 shots, rear 3/4 shots. You can see here in 62, so both 61 and 62, the antenna remains. A lot of times this antenna area won't look super nice, and that has to do with the fact that that piece, that little clip out, is pot metal. So what a lot of people do, and I haven't really talked about this, is if you had one that didn't look good, you could always change this peak molding. And you could go with the 63 peak molding, and it basically eliminates the antenna there. So I know some people would go, well, why would you do that? I want to be able to listen to my radio, you know? It's like, how many people listen to FM radio? You know, more than likely, you know, most don't. But, you know, I guess it just depends on preference, so I wanted to mention that. So what I'm going to do here, I know this video is getting a little bit longer. Hopefully you appreciate this information. Leave a comment. If you want to leave a thanks or super thanks, you know, kind of a tip, if you will. If this helps you, certainly you can do that here on my channel. Any of that money that is collected goes towards me buying more stuff to research things to do future videos. What I want to point out here is if you take a look at the top, you know, it's hard to tell in this photo, but it looks new. And what I mean by that is, like, with some of the shadows, it's like, hey, is that the sun? Is that, you know, is it faded? But certainly it looks really, really good. When I look in these, the door jambs, you can kind of see right in here. It's hard to tell. You know, a lot of people go, hey, how would I know if this is a super nice car? You know, I don't know what's underneath the paint. Well, I'm not a paint and body person. There are paint and body people that can do different things to kind of tell, is it a Bondo car? Is it this or is it that? You know, you can kind of tell in here that it's been repainted. And it's not a bad thing. I'm just reinforcing that. It's hard to tell what this is, you know, in here, if this is just kind of just what they repainted over. But certainly it does look clean, so to speak, which is good. Of course, in 62, and again, I always forget, it's late 62, I think it's 63, that they go away from the crank little vent windows. So in 62, you see here, late model 62, you have the crank windows. Furthermore, they've done a great job of showing the glove box, you know, and just showing a lot of different aspects that not all of the sellers do. It helps you just to kind of look at every little crevice on the car. We can see here, like, for instance, this bolt was changed out, right? You know, if there's a missing bolt during a restoration, someone's just going to put that in, and that's, of course, underneath. You're never going to see that. But those are little things that I sometimes will look for, you know, when I'm looking to see, you know, if it's a car that I would recommend to someone. We can see here the typical little bit of stuff that you're going to see on the bottom of these deck lids. This is normal. So again, I would not get freaked out by that. I've talked about that in the past. That has to do with the adhesive that was used on the deck lids and the hoods. I think one of the standout things of this car, we looked at the front 3/4, rear 3/4 shots. It looks beautiful, but the engine bay, I think they did a great job. So often these cars look nice, but the engine bays are just like, who cares? You know, it's an engine, you know, and that's fine. But when people take the time, I like to really kind of call this out. We can see that everything looks nice and painted. It looks very, very clean. You can see here the windshield wiper motor, you know, it has that silver paint on it, which is kind of key. It has the fan shroud. It is an AC car. It has the 3-port mechanical fuel pump. It has an upgraded air condition compressor, which I did mention, and that's going to mean that it has the new hoses. It also has various other components that have been upgraded, and that's key because you get the newer refrigerant. And, you know, God forbid you run into an issue, you could take this to a local mechanic, knock on wood, more than likely, or shop or AC shop and say, hey, can you check it? Can you check the refrigerant? Can you do that? And, it's probably going to be pretty cold. I know my 65 is. We can see that they did leave the single reservoir, or often referred to as single pot, for the brake reservoir there, which I always talk about, the master cylinder, changing to a dual if possible. But certainly there's some people that want to leave it more original, and I understand it. I always recommend a dual reservoir if at all possible. The last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap this video up. I know it's a little long for some. Again, when you look under the engine bay, or you look under the undercarriage, I should say, this is not a slight. I spent a lot of money cleaning my 64, and they still get a little bit nasty. Okay, I like that it's really dry underneath here. Some of these cars I have seen just caked with oil, because these cars are known to leak, especially if they haven't been refurbished at all. So again, it's not a slight against the seller, but there's certainly, when you look in here, it's not perfect, but you can see that this car has had, the undercoating and things like that. It's hard to say, without seeing it in person, like, is it perfect all the way through? I would say that it looks solid to me, and that's a key thing. Now, here's one thing I mentioned in my key callouts. I can't be 100% certain, but I'm 90%, 95, maybe 98% sure. We're looking, we're under the car. We see the oil pan here. We see the oil filter. You see this hose right here. This hose is coming from the crank-mounted power steering pump, which is standard on these cars, and it's coming right over here to the reservoir. I know this because I've taken this off my car. I've rebuilt my car. I do not believe that this is a power steering hose. Okay, and I know you might be thinking, well, who cares? The reason for this, and I know this because I did this on my 64, and luckily I didn't screw anything up, and I had to change it, and I did change it fairly quick. This hose, if it's not a power steering line hose, it's not rated for that pressure. And what happened in my car is basically this hose will collapse. And it looks like it's pretty thin through here, but basically what it does is if it collapses, it can't get the fluid from the reservoir into the pump. And this is a very high pressure system. The reason, something I learned, is when you have a power steering rated line, it has kind of a webbing that is built into the material, and it keeps it where it can't collapse. So it's very easy to change for the most part. It is tight to get up in here with your hand. You have to basically, pull each side off. You put the one side on, and then you kind of have to finagle it and get the other side on, and then tighten it down. So anyone could change that, but I think that was just the key call out that I wanted to mention. I say anyone that has a little mechanical ability that wants to get underneath their car, and trust me, get a little bit dirty, because again, you see this car here. These cars, as I've said, they are typically not super clean underneath, right? So I never want to hit anyone for the fact that, hey, you didn't detail all underneath your car. But again, this car is so nice above, you start to look at some of, the grease around, where the spindles are at and things like that. To me, if I was in the market and I bought this car, as nice as it appears everywhere else, I would probably spend the time. There's people that do if you look up the dry ice blasting underneath these cars, that'll take all the gunk off and that type of stuff. This car, of course, let's not forget, it was a Northeast car, although it does look really nice in that era. In that area, I should say, just like my 64, there were, I'm sure there's still shops that will undercoat your entire car, like in addition to what was on the factory. And that's what my 64 had. And I was actually happy because it had it all around the rear end of the car, and I was able to scrape a lot of that off and then paint it and make it look nice. So certainly, again, I'm not knocking them whatsoever. It's just a casual observation that I had. This is the tires I mentioned where they kind of wrapped them and they said, hey, we'll include these with the sale. Some people are going to go, don't care, take them to the local tire recycler. Other people might say, hey, listen, JFK was in this car. These are the original tires that were on the car at that point. You can start to really kind of tie things together, and people you would think that would want to keep those. I did mention again that they mentioned the White House had provided that plaque. We can do a basic search, as I mentioned. October 14th, 1962. JFK was in that area. So I would be willing to say that, that's true. And certainly, like, let's say this was the guy that owned it. Well, then boom, there's your, there's your evidence, right? I would assume that, these are Secret Service guys in the front, at least. But again, I don't know 100%. With that being said, again, I want to thank Devious Customs for the continued support. If you are looking for parts whatsoever for your Lincoln, I really appreciate Jeff at Devious Customs. I want to thank Colorado Custom Wheels. Oftentimes people ask me, hey, ODB, what wheels do you have on your 64 Lincoln? There's the rendering as I'm trying to stretch right there. I'm really bad about doing that in reverse. I say Colorado Custom. You can go to coloradocustom.com and you can basically go to their premium wheels, and those are what they refer to as their Lincoln replica wheels. You're not going to have the hubcaps, aka wheel covers, flying off anymore, and you're going to have a billet aluminum wheel that is machined to look just like the hubcap. And oh, by the way, you can even have them customize the covers that are in the middle of the wheel. So for instance, if you want to do their new floaters where the Lincoln emblem always stays in the right orientation, or in my case, I went above and beyond thanks to the team there, and I added the name of the car, Smuggler's Blues, onto my hub or center caps. So you have that option. Lastly, I want to thank Steel Rubber for the continued support of Lincoln Addict Podcast. These folks are a family-owned business in the Carolinas, and they produce, arguably, there's really no argument, the best moldings in the business. So all of that weather stripping, you just want to go to Steel Rubber, STEELE rubber.com. You can get a free catalog, and they also have all of the parts listed there. Let me warn you, this stuff is not cheap, but if you have a car that's worth $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 and you're looking to go, hey, I need to get weather stripping already, keep those receipts. Include those, God forbid, if I say a future sale of your car, and people will go, wow, they invested $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, whatever that number is, into the car for the weather stripping. That's going to help the value of that car. To me, it's very similar to real estate. If you put some stuff into your house value is going to go up potentially, right? It's kind of the same thing with some of these collector cars. Lastly, but certainly not least, Griot's Garage. Nick Griot, the leader over there now at Griot's. He came on the podcast before. If you don't trust me, go back and listen to his audio. Griot's, that's GRIOTS Garage.com. Of course, they're also on social media, and on their YouTube channel, they've been doing some really cool videos breaking down the proper way that the professionals detail these different rides and do the clay bars and waxing and all that stuff. They even have these new pods, which are super cool. If you're like me and you always put too much soap in to your wash bucket, you take a pod, very much like the pod that you put possibly in your washer and at home for your clothes, and you throw that pod in your wash bucket, and it's the exact amount that you need for your bucket. So it's pretty cool, and that is brought to you. I think they're the first in the world from a detailing product perspective to offer that. So it's super cool. And if you're concerned about putting too much or too little, you just get the pod and you're good to go. So let me know what you think. I'm looking at my timer. I'm just under 45 minutes. I am going to include this as a podcast episode and as a YouTube video. So check me out. Let your friends and family know. And if you're looking to buy a car, I'm doing everything I can to give you guys as much information, as much intel as possible to look at. This may not be the car that you're looking to buy, but certainly in the future, you may be looking to get into a mid-60s, early 60s, late 60s Lincoln Continental. And keep it tuned to Lincoln Addict Podcast here and the Lincoln Addict YouTube channel, and I will give you as much free intel as possible. Again, if you want to support with a membership or a tip or a super thanks, please do so here. You can also buy stickers at LincolnAddict.com. Thank you for the support. Hope you had a great Independence Day. Stay on the rise, everyone. We're out of here. Peace.
Welcome to L.A.